Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down with great thinkers, great leaders to help inspire and create more leaders for the future, because I believe the world needs more leaders. And in episode 36, I sit down with someone I've known probably longer than anybody else, certainly longer than anybody who's been on this show. It's my brother, Scott, my older brother, Scott. Scott is the director of the NICE Center at North Dakota State University. The NICE Center is a place for students to learn entrepreneurship, practice entrepreneurship, do entrepreneurship. Their goal is to certainly create entrepreneurs, but more so create more entrepreneurial thinkers. And Scott has some great lines about what they're working on. So in this episode, we talked about why is an entrepreneurial mindset important? How can it help you in life? What's happening with what we call the unbundling of the educational system? You know, this was started before COVID, but was certainly accelerated due to COVID. So in this episode, we unpack what do colleges and universities look like post-pandemic, but also what do they look like in this unbundled world with online courses and technology and taking courses and classes from anyone, anywhere. Really interesting conversation. You'll find we were often mistaken when people would call our home phone number when we were kids for having fairly similar voices. So if that's confusing, I apologize. But you know I'm asking the questions, he's answering. So let's dive in with my older brother, Scott Meyer, here on episode 36 of the Leadmore podcast. All right, welcome to another edition of the Leadmore podcast, episode 36 here with my brother, Scott Meyer. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm a little miffed it took 36 episodes, but otherwise I'm good. Pandemic good is what I've been saying, you know?
Pandemic good. Well, for those who I don't think many people will remember, but this is actually just a continuation of our old show 11 years ago when we started a podcast in 2010 called Cloud Control.
It was huge. We were 11 years ahead of our time. But I've been negotiating advertising deals since then and haven't gotten any. So now we're back. We're going to pick it up.
So when we started 2009, started 9 Clouds, about 6 months, 7 months in 2010, we were like, let's start a podcast because there was only I don't know, a dozen of them.
3. Yeah.
Julian Smith, I remember. And so we were like, we'll just talk about the latest tech news. And we did it in our living room at Shriver Square in downtown Sioux Falls. And nobody listened. And so.
Right. Well, that's what Seth Godin says. You should do a podcast to improve your thinking. So I like to believe that we improved our thinking, even though no one listened. So yeah, that's why we're taking advantage of new tech today. We're actually on Clubhouse at the same time we're recording a podcast. So we know at least 2 people are going to listen to this because they're listening right now.
Yes, we are trying the first time ever a live Leadmore podcast, dual recorded on Zoom, not recorded on Clubhouse, but you can listen to the recording as if you're in our living room here. Well, we're on Zoom. But
right.
All right, so let's dig in. Don't have an agenda from Cloud Control 2010. Instead, we're going to talk about education because you now have sort of blurred your worlds together of entrepreneurship and education at the collegiate level. So tell folks what you do right now.
Yeah, so I am the Osborne Executive Director of Entrepreneurship. So basically the Director of Entrepreneurship at the NICE Center at North Dakota State University. So the NICE Center is named the NICE Center because it's all about teaching people empathy. So how do you understand a problem before you then go solve it? And I learned once I got here that there's a thing that people say, like they say Minnesota nice, they also say North Dakota nice. I know growing up, I never ever heard South Dakota nice. So I figured once I crossed the border.
So how's it different than Minnesota?
I think it's just that same cold, like publicly nice. Like you're going to treat everyone nicely and then back talk them after they walk away. So it's culturally similar. Yeah, I think so.
Someone told me today, I was talking to someone who actually, speaking of Clubhouse, is trying to make sort of a audio app in that Clubhouse space, but the only difference is it's required to also be on video. So like drop in audio, but also video. And the reason he said the video is so important is he thinks we as humans, it's natural for us to mimic each other's face, and kind of like respond, which is what shows empathy. And so that he feels like in this world of audio only, social media, especially text, Facebook, Twitter, that's how we've lost a lot of empathy and we've just become, very divided. Yeah. Speaking of empathy. So
yeah, no, that's what we try to think about is how do we, our vision is we want to introduce entrepreneurship to all high school and college students in North Dakota. So what we're saying is 95 by 25. So 95% of North Dakota students will be introduced to entrepreneurship by 2025. And we kind of did that because we've been doing research with some of our programs, and there's almost a straight line down in the willingness of someone to take risks the older they get. So a freshman in high school, they say that they're willing to take risks. They identify as creative. They are more willing to think of themselves as an entrepreneur. And then every single year of high school, they go down and down and down. And so it's either
even at high school.
Yeah, high school. Yeah. And so by the time they get to me at college, they're maybe interested in entrepreneurship because they want to work for a startup, but a lot of them don't think of themselves as entrepreneurs, even though they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, how do we get young people to just know that entrepreneurship is an option? And then more importantly, like have those skills of opportunity mindset, of resilience, of, being able to collaborate with someone. And so that's kind of, where we're headed, I think. And there's a lot of entrepreneurship centers sprouting up at universities, and some are more like accelerators, taking people with ideas and getting them to go faster. I think about us as 0 to 1. You don't know anything about entrepreneurship. We're going to give you a taste of it. And if you're interested, we're going to hand you off to SBA or a local accelerator or whatever, a co-working space, whatever it might be.
So exposure to entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily mean like success is starting a business, but it's adapting the mindset or the skills that an entrepreneur may have, thinking entrepreneurially.
Yeah, I mean, we know that less than 4% of North Dakotans are entrepreneurs. It's even lower in South Dakota percentage-wise. And so, I mean, I really believe that if you want to have a successful economy, if you want to have a more equitable society, you need to have the ability to create something yourself, and not have to rely on someone picking you, to like bet on yourself essentially. And so if we can get more people to do that and think about that at a young age, I think they'll be more likely to stay or to do that when they're older too.
I know you approach a lot of what you do with data. Is there any data on that risk tolerance across regionally across the country? Because I always feel like Midwest folks are a little more risk averse. Is that why we have less entrepreneurs, or not necessarily?
I haven't seen any data on the geographic. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around Silicon Valley versus the rest of the country, and there's definitely more of an openness to failure. There's a lot of data on demographics. So, I mean, that came up in our research too, that, women were less likely than men to consider themselves entrepreneurs, people of color less likely than white people. So you see that pretty standard across the board. I think the word entrepreneur is tough because it definitely implies for most people like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, and not an artist or someone doing a side hustle or someone starting an Etsy shop. And so I think that's where we need to democratize entrepreneurship, is to make people think about it as like a thing you do alongside. Like, I think the example Steve Blank talks about is it's kind of like music appreciation. Like everybody learns music, even if you're not trying to be a musician. It's something that you learn to appreciate or have the basics of. Like, how do we have entrepreneurial appreciation, right? And I may not want to be one, but I appreciate people who start things.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, it definitely seems like when we started in 2009, at least I feel like this in Sioux Falls, it wasn't the thing to do. And whether it be Zuckerberg, the social network movie, social media apps, the proliferation of all these startup, frankly, like the startup bro persona, like that became the model of what an entrepreneur was, which is clearly not true. I mean, entrepreneurs have existed for decades, hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I think that's most entrepreneurs are not going to be that, right? Especially in smaller communities. And I think the skill that we see students really grab onto that I think is powerful is the fact that like you can identify problems and just solve them yourself. Like you don't have to identify them and complain. You can just identify them, solve them. And having that vision to say, okay, someone's doing this and they're having a problem, maybe I could solve it. And maybe then I also make money while doing it.
So I've always been the advocate of like, the best way to learn entrepreneurship is to do it, right? Like we gave ourselves titles when we started a business. We didn't necessarily earn them. That's part of this show at Leadmore, is like, you don't have to be a CEO to be a leader. Leaders exist everywhere. So how do you, at the NICE Center, teach entrepreneur? Like, I just don't think it's hard to teach in a textbook, right? So how do you teach it through practice?
Yeah, we do it. I mean, we have five kind of key pillars. One of them is that entrepreneurship can and should be taught. So I think you can teach people to think entrepreneurially. And the way that you do that is by putting them in situations to do it. And so what we often do is have them think of projects for themselves initially. Like, what's something I've always wanted to learn? Now go try to solve that problem. And now go look at someone else's problem, try to solve that one. And now we're going to let you come up with an idea. So we can give them models and frameworks that help them do it faster and better. Things like the business model canvas, or
Yep.
just customer discovery. How do we ask someone what their challenge is instead of assuming? You probably can empathize with this, that whenever I failed with an idea, it was because I fell in love with the idea and I didn't do enough of like seeing if people actually needed it. And that's
Yeah,
really like that
totally.
skill. So yeah, I think it's in the classroom, but also outside of it. So probably 80% of what we do at the Nice Center is co-curricular, is getting people to do things. So whether that is a reverse pitch competition where we have an industry partner come in and say, hey, we're struggling with, like we had Sanford come in, we want to increase access to rural healthcare. Students have 4 hours to come up with potential solutions. So they're not having to identify the problems. I think one thing I've noticed is for college students, when you say find a problem to solve, they're thinking about their own lives, and
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
food delivery late at night.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
like beer at the door, right? And so it's fun to give them validated problems that are actually happening and then get them to think about that. So
So to
yeah,
push that
we do a lot of
example
that.
like a step forward, I know a big part of creating more entrepreneurs is building an ecosystem. So how do you make
Mm.
how do these North Dakota students get real life examples, or how do they see a path that, even if I don't want to start a business, by thinking this way, I could maybe get a job at Microsoft, who's in town in Fargo, or um, small companies, big companies. How do you buy the community into this idea of creating more entrepreneurial
Yeah.
thinkers?
Yeah, we often say that you can't be what you can't see. And so really a big part of it for us is connecting campus with community. So that's, bringing industry people into the classroom or into our workshops and having them present the actual problems they're working on, and then the students can solve them. And then vice versa, as a part of my class, you have to attend stuff in the community. Like, you have to go to 1 Million Cups, you have to
Sure.
go to the guest speakers, you have to go to these things. And so when they see, oh, that guy, that girl can do it, like I could too, right? I think that's a big part of it, is just seeing that this person from Oaks, North Dakota is building a company. Like, I'm from Fargo, why don't I build a company? Like, there's nothing stopping me, So there's one thing we're trying to do, again, with customer discovery. We've talked to a lot of high school and college students about how do you want to learn and be exposed, and the answer is like video, basically across the board.
Hmm.
It's like, get on TikTok, get on YouTube. So
Interesting.
one thing we're doing is every week we're doing a live stream, and then you can watch the recording afterwards of a student entrepreneur. And so my students are finding people across campus. Like, one kid in my class is flipping sneakers, right? Like, he's buying Jordans and then upselling them. So we're interviewing him, right? Like, he's an entrepreneur. And so just showing them the vast array of what entrepreneurism can be, because it's just opportunity creation, which is what we all need.
Cool. Well, that's a perfect segue, because I know one of the things we wanted to talk about today was sort of the unbundling of education, but also related to that, how COVID has shaped education. I
Mm-hmm.
think you're episode 36, and I think we've talked about COVID on every single one, just because it's so pervasive in our society. I think we probably both read over the holidays Scott Galloway's book about post-corona, and he had a huge section dedicated toward education. It seems like, just like a lot of things with COVID, the rich get richer. The Ivy League schools, probably a school like yours, a land grant is going to be okay, these state schools, but there's going to be this kind of just middle mess in terms of what the proposition of college is in a
Yeah.
post-COVID world. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, it's such a fascinating topic, and I'm really interested in it. And there's about 5,000 like universities, colleges, like giving 4-year kind of degrees in the U.S. And just a sliver of those are like land grant, like NDSU or SDSU, that are like research institutions and doing these things. And then you have the array of community colleges, 2-year
Yep.
experiences, the
Liberal
liberal arts
arts.
schools, yeah. And so it's really like, what's it for? And I think the answer I keep coming back to is like, obviously we talk about COVID as an accelerant, but I think the solution to the higher ed crisis is more education. Like, what we need is to offer more. And so when we talk about online versus offline, or we talk about different models, it's always like an and. So you don't need to get rid of a 4-year residential experience. But I think, unfortunately, that's going to be something that, wealthier families probably do because they can afford it. And, 80% of my students have a full-time job while they're going to school. A lot of them and
Full-time
other
job.
people, yeah, full-time job. And that's just like kids in my class that I've asked, right? So I don't know across campus, but that's, in my own little data pool. But what happens if we offer new modes of learning and community for people wherever they live, whenever they need it? I think what you see is more people then can access education. And I think what the data shows is education is the fastest way to have mobility, right? Economic mobility. But the biggest determinant on if you get an education is your wealth. So like, the wealth, like you said, the rich are getting richer in a way. So I think the challenge, especially the land grant universities, is our mission is to serve the state, right? Is to serve the people. So how do we better deliver education to everyone? And so if you think about education and technology, like we could allow everyone in regardless of where they start. So instead of having like an entrance exam, you're all now at the same level and we can start together. We have the ability with technology to give personalized experiences based on where someone is academically, right? And so when you use that technology to personalize and reach people where they're at, all of a sudden more people can learn, right? More people can get education.
Yep.
So I think that's really important, is to just think about how do we do more of that. And I think the way we scale education is by including other people, so including business, including, college courses in high school, college courses at employers. Like there's a really cool company called Guild that offers higher education within a company. So if I'm Walmart, I actually offer the English 101 to my employees, right? Like, how do you just get education everywhere?
Yeah.
Because if we've learned anything, like we don't need a physical space, right? So what happens when a campus isn't the only way to get an education? Then it opens up a lot of possibilities.
I like that vision. I think where it becomes harder for me to wrap my head around is like in Galloway's book, he basically makes you realize that, like everything, education is a business, right? And all these university presidents last summer had to say, yeah, we'll be open, we'll be safe, like come back, because they needed those deposits, right? And so how does that, I like your like and point, but in business, we also are very quick to like map out our territory and recognize our competition. Do you think we can serve the greater good if it's just more education for everyone? Or will people start saying, no, that's my territory, like, get off my turf?
Yeah, I mean, you can't charge the same price if you're not doing housing and doing student fees, and and that's so that's where like the schools that exist are overbuilt. Like if you're starting from scratch, you wouldn't build all these residential halls and all these study spaces. So it's kind of like any legacy business. You have these old expenses that you have to deal with, and a new incumbent or someone new that's challenging the incumbent doesn't have to deal with that. And so I think you see a lot of people coming in with, individual courses. There may be teaching, there may be online options. So I think but the best example I think is Arizona State. They have a blend where they have a massive campus, but they also have 50,000 students learning online with no, they're not paying for all of that stuff. And so it's
so that might make them technically the largest school in the country.
I think they're the largest school in the country. Yeah, I think they're 120, 130,000. And it's just because they're able to reach a lot of people. I think what you're going to have consolidation though too. Like some schools aren't going to make it, and I think you really have to be good at what you do. And so I think I should check my data on this, but I think there's 13 schools in North Dakota, something like that. So it's like, you think about a state of 750,000, like that's a lot of schools, right? And like, how do we better collaborate among those institutions? So I think that's going to be fascinating to watch, is how does like our alma mater, Luther, like how do they survive? How do they charge a really high premium versus a place like NDSU or SDC, which is, more affordable and serving a ton of people at once? It's going to be, some people are going to get squeezed out for sure.
Yeah. And that's maybe to this topic or this title of the Clubhouse that we're also on, which is the unbundling. I think was it Mark Andreessen, or is it?
Yeah.
I remember, I think he said you only make money through either bundling or unbundling. So, the big companies get unbundled, these new specialties get all bundled up. So is that the route in education? Does each of those North Dakota schools have a specialty? Or does that become then then what about the liberal arts where you're supposed to learn everything? How does how do you, because like even an entrepreneur center is kind of like a version of unbundling, right? You're trying to teach a skill set and a mindset across all industries.
Yeah, I think, the hope would be that there's a core curriculum that students learn, and the idea is that that's essential for being a member of society, right? Like there's things that you should learn. Um, and I think if you unbundle past a point, you're not going to, right? If I'm taking just the Skillshare class, or I'm taking the Google certifications, like I'm totally just going to I'm doing this to gain this specific skill. So I hope that there's still a place where we have like a core set of these are important things that everyone should learn. But I think the direction it'll go is we don't need a professor in every county teaching that, right? Like the best teachers, you would assume with technology, are going to aggregate and get more students and be able to command a higher price salary. And the ones who aren't, won't have positions. But you have this fascinating world, obviously, with academia. It's a monopoly where you have state support and you have tenure, so it's doesn't change fast at all. So I think the risk is that other people are going to do it. They're just not going to wait around for higher ed to get engaging online far-reaching content. Instead, they're going to go to a rite of passage to learn their English instead of the English 101 teacher. So I hope higher ed like sees what's coming, and a lot of people are thinking about it, but obviously institutions are hard to change. But if we've learned anything with COVID, it's that you can, right? Institutions can change, and whether it's a school or a government, like things can happen. And so I'm optimistic that there's going to be models. Kind of what we think about at the Nice Center is how do we be like that weird like beta tester out there, and if it works, the university can copy us, and if it doesn't, they can be like, oh, that's a crazy Nice Center. We don't associate with them, so we can kind of be
they literally
the
give you a
skunk works.
physical space off to the side, so that
if
they want to associate, they can.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to go there next too with in the spirit of this podcast with leadership. How do you then, because you're just an entrepreneur coming, you have a master's degree, but coming and starting this, you're the first person that has your job, brand new center. How do you, in the spirit of leadership, get this traditional industry, which is obviously successful, to buy into some of these new ideas? Even teaching a class on Zoom was hard last fall semester, right? For many teachers. Yeah. And so, now here we're talking about cohort-based courses and all these other ways to learn, no classroom, all virtual, all the software. How can, what do the colleagues think of the way that you guys are doing it at the Nice Center? Yeah,
I think they're supportive. Sometimes I think it's hard to wrap their minds around maybe what we're doing, or like they're not, it's not what they're thinking about. We kind of take an entrepreneurial approach of try it, see how it works, iterate. And, I think we move pretty fast. And so at some point you're moving fast enough that the institution can't pin you down because you've already like iterated 3 times since that version. But I think what like the university wants new models, right? And they know there's support from private donors, from industry, that like this stuff is important. I think there's a big challenge around credentialing, right? So like the major power that the university has is this credential, this piece of paper. And I do like, I think Andreessen said that, the sheepskin effect, I think it was called, where like, if you study 7/8 of a college degree, you don't get paid 7/8, right? You only get the bump of having a college degree when you're done. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, a credential is just showing people you can finish something, right? Like I went through and finished this thing, and you immediately get paid more. Now you're available to apply for 44% of the jobs, I think, in the US require a bachelor's, right? Wow. So there's this tremendous gatekeeper power. And so I think what higher ed needs to figure out is how do we use that power to enable other options? Because maybe I don't need to go for 4 years to be an entrepreneur, right? Like I've had a number of students who have come to me with that question, like, should I be here? And it's always like, what are you here for? Is it the piece of paper? And if so, can you just play the game, get the piece of paper while starting your business or do your thing? Or if you don't care, you don't want to play that game, like what game are you playing? You're playing Get Started Soon, like, okay, go start. So I think, so that's hard. But I think in general, higher ed wants to be outward looking, but they're just not used to it. The main job of people at research universities is actually research. 60% of what they're supposed to do is research. And so they're not thinking about how do I go to the local Rotary Club or to tell people about what we're doing. They're more focused on the scholarly work. So I think that's going to be a big change. There's going to need to be that outward kind of brand ambassador that's connecting the dots.
Yeah, and then I wonder, as a parent and looking back on my collegiate experience, it was so much more than the paper, right? Like if I should have just, there's so many other options if you are just trying to get that paper, right? But like we haven't even talked about outside of education, that dorm life and that social life and how you learn new social skills and how to be away from your comfort zone and your home. And there's all that too, that I wonder in a post-COVID world, because I think the online education thing is just not, is a boulder that just won't be stopped. Where do young adults, or just where do they pick, what replaces that, right?
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that kind of goes to the unbundling point, right? Like on one hand, you can charge a lot of money if you're a Luther and you bundle everything together, right? So here's your food, here's your entertainment, here's your friends, here's your education, here's your job
Yeah, that's what you're
opportunities.
paying for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all here, and it's great. It's a bubble. It's comfortable. You can really grow. I think on the flip side, you think about unbundling it, and it's like, okay, if I'm taking my classes online from wherever I live, like, is the dating aspect through Tinder or Bumble or something like that? Is my social activity through joining a local team or through, digital like means, right? Twitter or Clubhouse or whatever it might
Yep.
be.
Yeah.
Is my job through Fiverr, right? Like, so you can almost think about, you can take these pieces like an onion and peel them away. I think the challenge though is a lot of people haven't learned how to do that. So like if I'm an 18-year-old and now you're like, okay, just go to these 20 places and
Yeah. These
patch it
download these
together.
10 apps. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so if people learn how to learn and have that mindset, that's an option, and I think it'll be more and more common. But I think what I hope that we see more of is people taking a gap year, taking a year to get some of that experience of adulting. And then I think that will bring a lot of that maturity that then is required to either go to university or to do your own thing
Yeah.
without it.
Yeah. And I think that's what people, as we also stream this experiment on Clubhouse, I've heard that Clubhouse is bringing back sort of nuance or serendipity. I'm certainly curious, what does Clubhouse look like 12 months from now if or when we truly are outside of the pandemic, right? It's perfect right now, and we're all just starving for interaction and discussion. But yeah, you could get all of what you need through various, from your computer, wherever you live.
Yeah, if you're of that mindset, right? And I think I was just having a conversation before this about what does it mean to the community? Like if you're a remote worker and you go move to Moab or you go move to some beautiful city, but you're just online, you're extracting the benefits of that city and not giving back. Like what does that mean
Yeah.
to a community? So I think there's an important part of like learning to be part of a community. That I hope there are other ways people can learn to do in their hometowns too. Like, and that's kind of hopefully where that entrepreneurship helps, is to flip it around and say, okay, look around you,
Yeah.
who's in need, what's not right, and how do we fix that?
I talked to our mayor, Paul, here in Sioux Falls about that topic, which is like, I think South Dakota's economic development has been focused on bringing companies through tax breaks and friendly, business law. And like, what about bringing people, right? People who, they don't need to have Sioux Falls jobs, but they could come from, if people are leaving San Francisco, if they're leaving New York, why not have Sioux Falls be an option, right? And sell the community and sell the connection and the people and the culture. But yeah, I think there is a sense of, you could also just be kind of a hired gun and just live. That's just physically where you live, but you don't participate also at all in this kind of unbundled internet world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, for a lot of people, it's very theoretical still. So it'll be fascinating to see how fast or slow this comes, because I think we like to live in the future and figure out what's next. And it'll obviously take a long time for these changes, for some of them to take place. But I do think that at least parents and students are asking the question now of like, what am I paying for? Like if I'm paying the same tuition from Zoom University, what is the benefit? And so just being asked that question will force universities to add value, I think, which is a good challenge for them.
Yeah. And I think you talk about the future, the quote that I always remember, we both have young daughters, but is, I think if you're under fifth grader, they say that by the time you graduate and enter that workforce, 50% of the jobs don't yet exist, right? So we don't even know what Margot or Amelia will even do, because there's a good chance we can't even think about what it would be.
Yeah. That's I have similar stat. 65% of the jobs don't yet exist. Yeah, and I think it's I always think about it as a chef versus a cook. Like if you're following a cookbook and you don't have something, like you're out of luck. Like you don't know what to do. If you're a chef, you just kind of look what's in the kitchen, in the cupboard, and you make something from it. And I think that's where I hope entrepreneurship goes, and that's why I think it's a valuable skill. Is exactly that. Like we can't teach you to be, a TikTok influencer didn't exist 3 years ago.
Yep.
And now that's what half of my students want to be, right? So we don't want to teach people to be something. We want to teach them that learning is an ongoing process. So at the Nice Center, one thing we're experimenting with is actually doing on-demand online courses with a cohort alongside it. So any high schooler could start a course, Intro to Entrepreneurship. They take that, they can start middle of the night on their phone, and then with every 2 weeks we have a cohort starting. So then they learn alongside people, but they're also going on their own pace, learning kind of the concepts. And then at the end, if they want, they can pay for college credit. So it's a dual credit, but it's also a chance to just start. And I think that's one thing that's going to change is, we used to wait for Blockbuster to get the movies on Tuesday. You probably don't even remember this, but on Tuesdays, the new titles would come in and we'd go and get them. And now we just go online and expect them to be there, right? I think education will be the same way.
You mean Mr. Movies?
Yeah, I'm also Mr. Movies, yeah. So it's the same question. It's like, why do we have to wait till September to start, right? Why do I have to wait till January to start? Why do I have to only go Monday through Thursday from these? Like, why can't I take these two classes if they're at the same time? Like, that doesn't make sense when there's no limit on space. So I think that'll be a really big
that
change.
Approach at the Nice Center, where it isn't about, you don't have to be an entrepreneurship major. We'll take all majors. We're going to give you the tools, teach you how to use the tools, and then you go build whatever you want to build with those tools.
Yeah, exactly. So we always say, we work across campus and across the state, and that's why our mission is for all North Dakotan students, not just North Dakota State students. Obviously, it forces us to be good on our home turf, right? Like we better be reaching everyone across campus. And one way that we found to do that is really tie it into what they're studying. So entrepreneurship often becomes, what are you going to do with what you've learned, right? So you've learned about health science. Now what are you going to do with it? And often we don't ask that question early enough for students, I think.
Well, before we finish with some rapid fire about you, I want to ask about your leadership journey. We've talked about entrepreneurship and we've talked about education. What was the hardest part about switching from, being a co-founder of the company we started to going into a 100-plus-year-old organization? And although you're still doing entrepreneurship, it comes with its own set of cultural norms and behaviors and attitudes. How was that switch and making that change?
Yeah, it's been really good. I think the challenge is obviously you don't know where all the bodies are buried, and that can be good and bad, where right away you can just run, and if you make a mistake, you're just like, I'm new, I didn't know, right? And then at some point you're expected to know, but inevitably, I feel like every week or every month they're like, oh, you should talk to this person to do that, or you should, so there's these layers of hierarchy and layers of institution that allow the university to keep perpetuating, continuing, but it also creates slowness. And so what we're trying to do is, buck that a little bit, right, to be a little bit faster. And so that'd be the big difference from running your own company to, I get to run my own center, so there's a lot of autonomy within that, but then you still are a part of a larger system, so you have to follow certain rules. So that's been a big change, but I think it's good as a leader to just to bring that entrepreneurial spirit into an institution, because there's a lot of resources. There's tons of people that are incredibly smart and want to make a difference. And when they see a positive, optimistic center, they're like, oh yeah, maybe we could do that, So you kind of open the what if we instead of we can't do that.
So I didn't get to ask you at Zoom Christmas, so I can ask you on the podcast. Are you gonna be an entrepreneur and start a company again, or do you like being an entrepreneur within the walls of a university?
Yeah, probably both. I don't know. I mean, it's fun because I get to every day I tell my students to go start stuff. And so I get to launch companies every day almost. So I feel like I get to be an entrepreneur. So right now I'm happy running the Nice Center, but I always have ideas. So I can't promise anything, but as a good entrepreneur should, I have opportunity mindset, so I see opportunity everywhere.
It's the best part about having a podcast. You get to ask people questions that you want to ask. And when they're on recording, and now you're on Clubhouse. So Joel and Paul, these people
I
will
know.
hear you
My
too.
lawyer is writing it down.
All right. So we finished with some rapid fire just to get to know more about you or for the audience.
Okay.
I'll probably learn something too. A book that you recommend often or that you've read recently that made an impact on you?
Well, since we're talking education, I should promote the book. It's called The Fifth Wave.
That is huge.
It's a big book, yeah. No, but I really love this one. The Fifth Wave. It's called the subtitle, The Evolution of American Higher Education, but it's actually written by the president of ASU, and it just talks about what he says is the fifth wave of education, which is basically in the knowledge economy, we need more people to have knowledge. Like we just need to teach more people in whatever way we can, whether it's job training, skill training, 2-year, 4-year, whatever. So that one's been like changing a lot of my ideas about what education could be, and it's coming from an institution, which is kind of fun, not just a startup saying we can do better.
Interesting. Okay, like it. COVID, we're still in it. It's been stressful. You have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
How do you unplug or de-stress?
I've been really getting good at starting fires. So we have a fireplace,
Really?
and I now have like very specific techniques to creating amazing fires. And it's one of my favorite things about winter in general, and also just being home more is, 1 p.m. fire after lunch. Just stoke that up, get that burning all day. 8 hours of wood. So I got a wood guy now. So if you need a hookup, I got someone who can deliver wood.
All right.
So that's about as outdoorsy as I get, is carrying the wood.
But you're still talking within the context of indoor. Like, could you do it outside when it's 5 degrees?
Oh yeah, why not?
Campfire, and get it going.
Oh yeah, I could cross apply these skills for sure. I mean, there'd be some wind, but I think it'd still work.
Yeah, I mean, I know we weren't raised to be Boy Scouts, so.
I spent a few nights in a scamp.
All right, so now we move into a question we ask at Lemonly when we hire is, what's your superpower? So what's the one thing you do better than anyone else?
Well, I stole that question. I still use that at the Nice Center when we hire. Yeah, nice. That's now on our official list. So I love that question because, I think it gets to the fact that we don't often enough emphasize things you're really good at instead of trying to make everybody above average at everything. Like, just get really good at something you care about.
Yep.
I'd say in terms of one of my superpowers, it would be like enrollment, like getting other people excited about something we're working on and finding partners. So yeah, just if we have an idea, finding someone who will run with it and getting them excited about it.
Cool. Let's see, I'm forgetting one more. Jeez.
I can rapid fire you if you want.
What's that?
I can rapid fire question you if you want me to.
Well, I know the last one, but I know I'm forgetting one, but now I can't. Parenting advice. That's the one.
Oh, parenting advice.
So yeah, your girls are a little bit older than mine, or you started a little bit earlier. So what are you going to give Uncle John some advice?
It's hard to give parenting advice. I feel like
I always say this has been one of the best questions on the show because I think parents are underrated leaders. Obviously, we need them. They're fabric of holding society together in many ways, and so it's been fun. You hear very like tactical things to that's very specific. Like, don't do this, do this, and then very high level. Just let them be kids. Let them do what they want. So I'm curious if you were to say if we had another sibling who didn't yet have kids, what would you say to them?
Well, it's awesome. I mean, I would say on the tactical side, like just keep them fed and get sleep. That makes everything so much better. But, I think in general, trying to just be present and listen to them, which is actually really hard, I think, is like, I used to think I was really good at play, and then you have kids and they're just wanting to play. And it's like, oh, I just want to go read a book or go do this. But like, even a few minutes, we started playing Skippo with Amelia, which is a card game our grandma used to play.
Yep.
Man, she gets so into it, and it just is like so much fun for her. And she's learning how to lose, which is a really hard skill. So we're playing a lot of games to get her to lose some because that's hard.
So you don't let her win, right?
I know, I play, but she's good. Like, she'll win if she has the right cards. So I don't know if there's we want them to be kids and to play and do their thing. But the more that we can be with them and just be present is usually turns out good. But
certainly, I think those of us who are parents of younger kids, I think we'll look back on with this COVID time and in actually probably some positive light, right? All that time we get to spend it with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So lastly, I believe all leaders are forged and learn from the leaders who came before them, whether you studied them, parents, or people you just read in a book. So who are your leaders that have influenced you, Scott?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot about family, both of our parents, especially like having a father who was an entrepreneur, and I think our grandfather Jewel, who was, very like strong person in our family, just showing us like one way to live, one way that I really appreciate and want to emulate. I have a great mentor from college, John Mueller, who is just a thoughtful professor who really forced me to just ask questions about what is a good life and what does it mean to, be a citizen in the world, and trying to find meaning, I think, in what we do. So those are a few of like personal leaders, and in terms of other people, I really admire entrepreneurs who take risks, people who are betting on themselves, and that could be in any field. Mm-hmm. And just watching people create something that no one thought could be possible is really inspiring. And, we try to showcase leaders and entrepreneurs in our class of all types for that exact reason, right? Like, you can't be what you can't see. And I think if we can show more entrepreneurs and more leaders, just like you're doing, we're going to get more leaders and more entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I think that's all what you said is true. You can't be what you can't see. And I think the entrepreneurs who create a future that nobody sees makes that even more impressive, right? Mm-hmm. When they envision a world that they see so clearly to be true. Yeah. And yet when they pitch those ideas to people that are like, you're crazy, that'll never happen, right?
And that's where we are with this higher ed conversation, right? Like, I do think, the youngest higher ed institute that's in the top 10% is Stanford, which is like 100 plus years old. Wow. So it's not being disrupted. And so some universities or some individuals are going to see what's possible and go for it. And we're trying to be part of that. And I think just watching this space will be fascinating, because there's so much potential, and it's so important that we have educated, knowledgeable, empathetic citizens, that I think we all have to get it right for everyone's sake.
Yeah, and like us doing this podcast, it's not going to be a tool. It's not Clubhouse or Zoom or Circle or any like platform. It's just these convergence of these larger trends that someone will bind that all together and figure it out. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it'll be fun to watch. And I wonder about the timeline, right? So having little kids like us, what will it look like in 10 years, and what will we decide to do? That'll be fascinating. I have no idea right now, but check back in a decade after Cloud Control Part 3. Every 10 years we do it.
I think about that too. It's like I put this money away right into Margot's college fund. What do they call this? 2050s or something like that. And whatever that fund thing is. And you're like, is she going to use this? What's this going to look like when she's 18? What's it going to cost?
I'm sure she'll use it. We're just not sure what she'll use it on, but it'll be there.
Exactly. All right. Well, it's good to catch up in this format. And
that's right.
Thanks, Scott, for coming on the Leadmore podcast. Good conversation.
I'm honored. It was fun.
Take care. All right, everybody. That was episode 36 with my brother. If you didn't catch, I forgot to say that in the intro. We tried something completely different. If you've heard of the wildly popular mobile app Clubhouse, as we recorded that episode on Zoom, we also were putting that episode into a Clubhouse room. So there was a few folks who were listening live to that episode, and afterward, we stopped the Zoom recording, we pulled them up on stage, and we did some more kind of extended Q&A and discussion around this podcast episode. So I'll wait and see what people think, what the reaction was. If people enjoyed that, maybe we'll try that again. A little bit of Leadmore podcast live, which is kind of fun. But remember, we drop new episodes of the Leadmore podcast every Thursday, and you can find them wherever you subscribe or listen to podcasts, or check out leadmorepodcast.com. Make sure to give us a good review, and please take care. Be well.